I mean, I'll start with a bit of context. So my mother's family is Russian, and when I was growing up, my mum and my grandma grew up in Georgia in the former Soviet Union, and I'd spend basically every summer, like the full sort of 6 weeks, basically, I mean, no internet, like just maybe with a few Enid Blyton books, like not many, because they couldn't fit in the suitcase, and didn't sort of like Kindles weren't popular yet. So I basically, all I would do is like kind of read fantasy books and also kind of be in these other countries, or we also have some of the family in Ukraine, so I'd go and see them as well. And I think especially as I got older, I had a sense of like the options in my life that were there that didn't really exist for my extended family in the same way, or just like, just really how different my life was. Like, you don't really notice that sort of thing as a child, but kind of as I got older, I think the combination of like basically living in a fantasy world for, sort of a month and a half of the year, and that kind of really contributed to just a sense that my life should have like a purpose. Like it's really important that I should be doing something, and whatever it is, it's important. I don't know what it is, but it is important. And I think as a sort of teenager, like life is it's a bit bleak, isn't it? Small town in north of England, it's not really. But when I was 18, I got my first, like proper job, not for lack of trying before that, but, that's another story. So I got a job in a secure psychiatric ward when I was 18, having applied for more or less every NHS job under the sun that was available to me. And it was definitely a formative experience. I mean, I think it says something that they hired me at 18 when Tesco rejected me for shelf stacking after interview. That's stung. I don't know what that says about what they're looking for, these interviews. I'm not sure. No. And I just found basically I was kind of, at this job I was given kind of a level of responsibility and autonomy that was, if it's not illegal, it should be legal. But I really just found that it was like I finally had a responsibility or a challenge to rise to. And it was a very formative year, and I think in one way, something about working in a place like that is you kind of, I just felt like I really, all the time that there's, people are kind of suffering and going through various things, and it's all going on in life, and you see it as a young person, but I just really had no idea how I should engage with it, and how I could be involved, or how I could help, or really even make sense of it in a way. But there's kind of more structure to it in that setting, and also it's all on the surface, and people are looking to you to do something. So I just discovered a sense of potency that the lack of which had kind of been really frustrating me as a teenager. So yeah, I guess off the back of that, I applied to medical school and did that. So I kind of did that for a couple of years. Blah blah, usual sort of thing. Uni in London, won't say more. And then COVID sort of hit towards the end of my second year. Basically, I mean, I'd never sort of relaxed for a minute in my life. I mean, one of the many things that I discovered at my job in the psychiatric ward was the joys of being a workaholic. So that's about to become relevant. And when COVID started, I sort of got a job as soon as I could. I mean, I had no intention of sort of sitting around. I don't think I would have known how to do that. I didn't have to learn, so I just kind of worked as soon as I could. And I think basically almost through lack of an outlet, I mean, over the course of the next 18 months, I worked as much as I could handle, sort of neglected uni, but you could because medical school was basically sort of cancelled, and cultivated a growing substance habit in all of my spare time, which after 18 months, when society restarts, that's actually a problem. Like, you can't really rejoin society like that, if all you're doing is kind of doing that or kind of being at work. So I guess during this time, I had a GP placement. So it was talking about sort of January 2021. So at this point, it was like, things are kind of hardcore at work. And I only had to go to this GP placement once a fortnight. And the GP was none other than Diane Arthur, who some of you might know from the LBC. He teaches there. He's a GP. So, just in case you didn't know. So, and we didn't sort of like talk about any of this. I mean, I did Google his name at some point during the placement, so I was like, Diane Arthur, like, what sort of name is that? It was kind of funny anyway. It's like, someone like actually has a life, like somebody that teaches you, or in a sort of very, like professional context or something, and you're like, I know your secret. You have a life. You have some other thing going on that we're not supposed to talk about because I Googled you and that's how I know. So anyway, we didn't talk about it, but at some point he's like, he just like used the LBC Zoom to like log into something, and I recognised it because I had sort of been interested in Buddhism before or something, and I was like, I've been meaning to go there, and he was like, well, they've got stuff online. That's all the conversation that we had about it. So, until 6 months later, And, it's weird, isn't it, to be like, so, like, in front of, your little class of, like, medics, like, so, I Googled you. I wasn't do that. So I did Life with Full Attention, which was kind of ironic at the time, because I was sort of, either at work or high sort of 100% of the time, including during the course. So I'm not sure, to the extent to which I was practicing mindfulness. But I did get something out of it, I'm here now. To be honest, it was just nice to see a friendly face once a week and just talk about something normal. I mean, there was nothing, you couldn't really do anything in that time. And my flat, like, people were sort of really struggling in my flat as well. So it was just nice to just see like a smiling face, talk about like ideas or something, and I sort of kept doing the courses as my life sort of fell apart more and more. Eventually I just, kind of got to spring and it wasn't so sort of dire, and I just stopped going to work. And I guess, and eventually I just, I went on the summer retreat. I'd just been kind of doing these courses. I mean, I don't really remember anything from them, but I kept doing them, so I must have enjoyed them. I went on the summer retreat pretty much to sober up, but it was really the first time that I'd actually kind of reflected on how things had kind of got to that point, because in a way, I really had an idea of the sort of person that I was trying to be, kind of somebody that would be very competent and very sort of stoic. I probably read a book about stoicism as a teenager, and that somehow, got lodged in there somewhere. I sort of misunderstood it probably. It had just, it had just fallen apart, like things just hadn't worked. Like my idea of how it was going to be, how I was going to be, I was just wrong. Like I didn't even know what I was going to do in the next sort of few hours. By that point, I was so kind of like out of control. Like, so I guess I kind of had time to kind of understand, basically, yeah. I mean, like I said, how things got to that point. And I will just talk about one moment that, I talked about this last year. It was very significant, so it'll definitely come out again. So one day, it was the one day of silence. You kind of have a day and a half of silence, I'm sure, on these kinds of retreats. And on the silent day, I just remembered about this particular incident in the hospital that I'd completely forgotten about. And basically, it was sort of towards the end of when I was working, and I was just working on a ward that I didn't normally work on. It was just sort of agency shifts, and I wasn't really bothered. Like, I was just kind of there for something to do. I didn't really know what else to do with myself. And there was a patient there in a side room, so she wasn't one of my patients. I was working on sort of the bay next door, and she was dying. And she, I think she was sort of quite a proud woman, and English was a second language, and she was kind of saying to the nurses, like, something like, I want to see you, something like that. And the nurse said, we've propped the door open. Like, that's not what she meant. Like, it was, you could see that that's not what she meant. And I just kind of thought, like, I can't be asked with this. Like, I'm gonna just sit in my bay. In a way, it wasn't really my responsibility. But in a way, I guess this really came back to me because it was really as if I'd seen what was going on. I knew like what was happening, and knowing, like with that awareness, I turned away, you know. So it wasn't really that I, you know, on the scale of ethically dubious things that I've done, it's like, you know, in sort of practical way, it's kind of pretty low down. I mean, it wasn't even something that I did, you know, it's something that I didn't. And in many ways, you know, it would be easy to sort of excuse me for it, because, you know, like I said, like, but when I sort of relayed this story to Nyan Dai, who was on the team for that retreat, he kind of took my like remorse quite seriously, and you know, we had a really good conversation about it, and I just really felt that he had, you know, he was listening to me, and he had, you know, like he was taking the problem seriously. And I kind of said, you know, at the end, like, you know, she's definitely dead now. I don't even remember her name really. So, you know, what do I kind of do with this? And he suggested two things, neither of which I would have come up with by myself, to be honest. That I, one, feel grateful towards her, and two, do something ritually for her. And I was kind of like a bit blown away. Like, I've not really taken advice in my life, but that was advice that I took. And, you know, I felt really that I'd come into contact with somebody who understood more than me, and somebody that I could really learn from, which I really did. I mean, I didn't have that attitude in general in life. So it's kind of, you know, props to Nyan Dai for working through that. So, yeah, let me think. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, I basically just started coming along from there. You know, I took a year off uni and did something else, and kind of just like tried to, you know, sort my life out, which all, you know, was well and good. But I guess maybe one thing that I'll finish on is asking for ordination, which I did in spring. And yeah, I think it was interesting because I'd kind of thought about it in principle for a little while before that, but I just kind of been like, you know, nah, like I don't really want to, basically. And then one day I just came back from a retreat, and I was so preoccupied with the idea that I really had to, that it basically, you know, I kind of couldn't wait. Like, I kind of hung around in the LBC, like, basically waiting for Danita to finish Dharma night for like 45 minutes. Just like looking at the books, you know. And in a way, it kind of just pointed to something I think that has been true in my life where, you know, important decisions and important moments, it's like they almost, they happen, or it's like I discover them rather than I've, you know, I've like planned or created them. You know, for me, I think the ideal that I had about who I wanted to be and the way that I wanted to live my life, in a way, the crumbling of that was, I mean, accelerated by COVID, but it couldn't support, you know, the weight of my sort of ambition and neurosis and all the rest of it. It just, it wasn't going to work. I mean, it was a good attempt, but ultimately it was completely based on, like, myself. And I suppose what I wanted was an ideal and a path. And, you know, I just have a lot of confidence in this one. And I suppose that's it, really. Thank you.